Welcome to the Not Old Better Show, Smithsonian Associates interview series on radio and podcast. The show covering all things health, wellness, culture, and more. The show for all of us who aren't old, we're better. Each week, we'll interview superstars, experts, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things, all related to this wonderful experience of getting better, not older. Now, here's your host, the award-winning Paul Vogelzang.
Thank you, and welcome to the Not Old Better Show Smithsonian Associates interview series on radio and podcast. I'm Paul Vogelzang, and today's episode is one that hits home for just about everyone. Let's be honest. Living longer is a gift, but it's not without worry. Alzheimer's disease and dementia, those two words alone are enough to shake even the strongest among us. They challenge memory, identity, and the very essence of who we are. But what if we're looking at it the wrong way? What if memory loss isn't an unavoidable sentence, but a complex, sometimes preventable, often misunderstood phenomenon? That's what today's returning guest and audience favorite, renowned neurologist, Smithsonian Associate, Dr. Barry Gordon, is here to unpack. You may remember Dr. Gordon from his previous appearances here on the program. And as I say, he is an audience favorite. He's captivated us with his rare blend of scientific clarity, wit, and heart. He's back today to talk about the facts and fictions surrounding Alzheimer's and other dementias. And Dr. Gordon will be back at Smithsonian Associates for another excellent, thorough presentation coming up. Check out our show notes for more details, but we have a snapshot with Dr. Gordon today. Dr. Barry Gordon is the founder of the Memory Clinic at Johns Hopkins and one of the country's leading voices in neurology and cognitive science. He's been challenging the field to look beyond the tired explanations of plaques and tangles and instead focus on what actually works: exercise, sleep, social connection, and confronting the diseases we can control. He'll explain when you should worry, what early warning signs really look like, and how to protect your brain starting now, today. He'll also tell us which so-called brain boosters are more hype than help and what treatments, real treatments, are on the horizon. So whether you're 55, 75, or supporting someone you love, this conversation could change the way you think about your brain, your future, and what's still possible. This is an important one. Let's welcome Smithsonian Associate, Dr. Barry Gordon. Smithsonian Associate, returning guest, Dr. Barry Gordon, is back with us. Welcome, Dr. Gordon.
Pleased to be here, Paul.
Good to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year indeed.
Good. Well, this is an important subject, and we're going to talk, of course, about your work, Alzheimer's, dementia, all of this stuff. And your upcoming Smithsonian Associates presentation will deal with the idea of understanding Alzheimer's disease and the dementias, what we know and what we can do. So let's just start, kind of right off the top. It's often seen, certainly for many of my audience, as being this looming shadow over aging. Are we fearing the right things when it comes to Alzheimer's and dementia, or are we fearing them in the wrong way, if that kind of makes sense?
Well, it does make sense. I'm of an age where this is a definite fear, as I think many of the audience will be.
Absolutely.
How much you should be afraid? Well, hard to say. It depends on your own personality, but it's definitely there. I mean, we all know people of our age and a bit beyond who are getting impaired. There might be some things we can do about it. And I want to emphasize might, maybe can, okay? None of this is definite, but it's one of the few things we might be able to do to help prevent or ameliorate anything that might come along in that respect. I'm also hoping to get across my own personal perspective, because in the sense of I have skin in the game. I'm old enough to be concerned. And this is what I, as a physician, physician researcher, and someone with Alzheimer's in the family or dementia in the family have been thinking about. So I'd like to help people navigate the morass of information they've been thrown. What may work, what may not, what they should just look at with amusement, and what they actually have to take action on to do something about.
That's helpful. I like the term the morass of information because there is just so much out there, so much of it that we need to kind of sift through, and we tend to be fixated. At least in my research, there's a great deal of information on this notion of plaques and
Uh-huh.
and tangles perhaps in the brain, if that's. And so I want to just ask you just bluntly, is that the wrong focus? What should we be prioritizing, instead of those things? And why hasn't the field shifted a little bit more meaningfully at this point?
You're asking very big questions.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. We'll
Um,
start. We'll start with the
the,
biggies.
the fundamental problem is that, first of all, there are many different causes of dementia.
Hmm.
And And there's even causes of non-dementia that look like dementia. Some people call them pseudo-dementia. For example, depression,
Hmm.
medication overuse, sedative drug overuse, things like that. Sleep deprivation can dull people. When you go back, when we talk about plaques and tangles, we're really talking about classic Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease, while the most common problem, is not the only problem, first of all, that causes dementia. Second of all, with respect to plaques and tangles, it was reasonable to look at those because they were the neuropathologic hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. And there's some evidence that attacking plaques, attacking what causes plaques, may help patients with Alzheimer's disease. But clearly, there's a deeper problem going on, and we don't know exactly what it is. And when I say we, of course, I mean people far more skilled and inventive and invested in this than I am, actual basic researchers. The real problem, in part, is that our cells, and we have trillions of them, are really, really complicated. All right. They don't work in a straightforward way. They haven't been engineered, they've been kludged together. So figuring out what's wrong is really, really hard. And the basic science of Alzheimer's disease is very difficult, in part because we live so long. If we were fruit flies, you'd be able to study this in 100 generations in the lab. But wait 100 generations for humans, and you're waiting a long time. Plus, of course, there's ethical things you can do with fruit flies, but you don't do with human beings. Um, or you can, in theory, do with fruit flies. There may be ethics there too, as well. Um, so, if anything, plaques and tangles were a reasonable thing to start with. They've been the subject of a lot of investigation. There's an awful lot of now questioning of exactly that issue, in part because the attacks against plaques have not been as successful as people hoped they were. They've been successful, but not as successful as they were. If anything, we need more research and more basic research because it's not just what goes on at the clinical human level, it's what's going on at the very basic cellular level that seems to be wrong. Something's wrong. Maybe many things are wrong. And that, by the way, may be one of the most important discoveries of recent years in my mind, which is what we call dementia is probably more than one condition. While there may be people who have only a single disease, it's not unreasonable to think that what we call dementia is several conditions co-occurring. And it's possible we might be able to help some of those conditions or hold them back and therefore prevent overt dementia.
One of the points that you've gotten across previously to us, and by the way, I just want to say thank you for all of your work. Your commitment to science on this subject is first rate. Um, your commitment to research, of course, is first rate as well. But one of the things that you told us last time when we talked, and I want to catch up a little bit on this subject, is that you said that aerobic exercise is really among the top things that we can be doing to improving brain health. So, is that, first of all, is that still the case? And second of all, it sounded simple then. It sounds simple now, but it's powerful. And I wonder, maybe catch us up on all of that and just reassure us. Is it too late to start?
So a lot of questions there. So first of
Yeah.
all, before even aerobic exercise, anybody's individual medical problems should be attacked. If
Mhm.
you have an elevated HbA1c, if you're diabetic, if you're a smoker, um, you know, if you have severe depression, et cetera, you've got to attack those first. That's the low hanging fruit.
Mhm.
Um, and by the way, saying that is easier than actually doing it. We all know
Mhm.
that. The
Mhm.
real other science I'm only going to touch on is changing our habits. And I have to confess, right now, I may be 2 for 10 on that regard myself. Okay,
Okay.
maybe,
Okay.
maybe if I'm generous.
Maybe.
It's really,
Okay.
it's
Me
really
too.
hard.
Yeah.
Okay, it's really hard to change. But that's what. Once you get past the low hanging fruit of, okay, I have these conditions that other people don't have, and I can treat them potentially. Then being aerobically fit seems to be the best guarantee or safeguard against getting dementia. And the reason isn't completely clear. On the one hand, being aerobically fit seems to improve cardiovascular health. And we now know that cardiovascular disease of various kinds is a synergy, synergizes with other brain conditions to cause overt dementia. So, for example, people with Alzheimer's disease pathologically in their brain may not express it during life unless they also have vascular disease on top of that. So, if you can remove one of those factors or reduce it, you can prevent potentially or forestall the appearance of overt dementia. The other aspect is it's very possible, maybe even likely, that aerobic fitness tunes up neurons as it does other things in the body in ways we don't completely understand. So it's not just the vascular component, but they actually get better in their own way. What One of the problems, if I may digress a little bit of modern science, has been that it's been uh, modular. In other words, we assumed the brain was independent of the heart. We assumed the brain was independent of the gut. One of the big advances lately has been to discover that these organ systems that we think are separate are in fact very tightly interrelated and have been for hundreds of millions of years. And oddly enough, exercise seems to help neurons. Why it should do that, no one knows. But somewhere back in our distant past, there was a connection, and that connection has persisted. Now, getting to whether it's worth it. If you're going to exercise, obviously the best thing to do is do it when you're a teenager and that early. If you're going to stay aerobically fit, and the evidence currently is aerobic fitness in middle age is best. But I think there's reason to believe that aerobic fitness at any age is something to aim for, even if you're 80, 90, um, because there's some evidence to believe and some reasons to believe that it could be helpful, not just for the brain benefits, but also for other benefits as well. But I'm talking about brain benefits right now. So that being said, as much as I hate it every time I look at some of the gear I've got, yes, keep pushing a little bit. Okay, yeah. Not to the point of chest pain, but
Yeah.
keep pushing a little
Yeah.
bit.
The other thing that we hear about an awful lot is this idea that engaging in crossword puzzles, memory games, those might be, considered brain boosters. Is there truth in that? Are they helpful, or is it just some comfort that we might take and helping an anxious aging mind like mine?
Well, I have two opinions about that.
Mhm.
Okay, one is I think there's no question that engaging in brain boosters boosts that ability. Namely, if you work on your memory, you can improve some aspect of your memory. There isn't really great evidence that improving one aspect of your memory, like doing crossword puzzles, improves some other aspect of your mental function, like doing painting. Okay.
Mm.
There's very little evidence for cross transfer. And there's actually not much evidence, and in my mind, not much reason to believe that they actually will boost the brain function at the level of cells.
Mhm.
It's not that you can't improve the pathways. It's like if you put a better program in your computer, If you move from, say, I don't know, I don't want to risk. If you move from an old operating system to a new operating system, your computer will behave better, but the actual machinery hasn't gotten any better. And I
Okay.
think the brain boosting training is something akin to that. You're not changing the actual mechanics of your brain, but you're changing how smoothly it works.
Mm.
And that's not a bad thing. But I think that relative to, say, aerobic exercise, aerobic fitness,
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
not going to be as good.
Mhm.
And not that people shouldn't do it. Along those lines, by the way, there's dancing. People have
Mm.
brought. I'll just jump in and mention dancing.
Please, yeah.
Well, dancing to the extent it's aerobic is good, but
Yeah.
dancing to the extent it involves social engagement, et cetera,
Yeah.
we don't know if those things are actually beneficial in themselves or not. And of course, the problem there is the research you can do on this or that can be done on this almost always has to be correlational rather than experimental. Namely, you take groups of people, you look at who's done dancing and who hasn't. In some cases, you might even have them do dancing or not, but
Mm.
you can't really play that out over the 10 to 20 years of a person's life, of the
Mm.
lifespan there. So that almost all of this is retrospective. Have you danced? Have you not danced? Or whatever. And we only know that it seems to be correlated with doing better, but we don't know why.
Mm. I want to prompt you on a subject too, and that is AI.
Right.
Is it beneficial? Are we seeing that, there's some leaning in the sense that we're getting good information, or is it a brain booster in and of itself?
Well, first of all, AI to me is a tool like
Mhm.
every tool we've used through human evolution, starting with
Mhm.
sticks and stones.
Mhm.
And it has both pluses and minuses. Stones can be very helpful, but they can also hurt you. Okay?
Yeah.
There's no question if you lean on AI too much, you're not exercising your mental abilities. On the
Yeah.
other hand, um, we use cars now. No one thinks of walking 100 miles the way we might have in the old days. So, that's what it is. And I think it's a tool that we can use.
Mhm.
What can't they get? Well, they can't get somebody who actually is living and worried about it right now, who has professional abilities, hopefully, and personal concerns. And how am I trying to navigate through this morass? So, there are currently AI, as you know, AI, even apps, the AI specialized AIs that do diagnosis or try to do diagnosis. Do I think they can be helpful? Yes. Do I think they can be potentially dangerous? Yes. People have to be very careful about them. I think there's a definite hope or help so long as you can realize they have negatives as well. One of the aspects, by the way, I think that actually is helpful, it's not strictly an AI. There are online tools now. People can test their own memory, test their own mental functions. And I think those can be potentially very helpful because, frankly, no one wants to go into a doctor's office and say, I think I'm having problems. They want to keep that to themselves. A small positive note there, the usual clinical rule of thumb is if you really think you're having problems, you probably don't. It's not an inevitably perfect rule, but one reason it works is because the dementing diseases, many of them impair mental self awareness.
Mm.
So that, for example, in advanced Alzheimer's disease, your listeners are probably aware, people don't know they're having problems. To the extent you know you're having a problem, you're not having that kind of problem because in theory, you should ask somebody close to you, like your spouse. But the problem is that your spouse probably has his or her own set of mental abilities that may be different than yours. And so they may think, they may not, hopefully, they're objective enough to say how things have changed over the years, but they may not be that objective.
So far, Dr. Barry Gordon has walked us through the unsettling numbers, the real science behind memory loss, and why your crossword puzzle habit might not be the cognitive armor you hoped it was. Dr. Gordon has challenged the status quo of Alzheimer's research and reminded us that fear, while natural, isn't a strategy. But here's where things get even more personal. What are the quiet signs? Those barely there memory slips that mean more than we think. When is forgetfulness harmless? And when is it a red flag waving right in front of us? What if your loved one is showing those signs and no one wants to say it out loud? And perhaps the biggest question, are we understanding what our brains can still do, even deep into old age? Coming up, Smithsonian Associate Dr. Barry Gordon is going to get real about the misdiagnoses, the memory myths, and the steps we all need to take right now to protect not just our memory, but our dignity, our independence, and our sense of self. And in a moment that might surprise you, he'll reveal the one thing he wishes society would stop believing about dementia altogether. Stay with us. The second half of this conversation is the part you'll be thinking about long after it's over. Hi, this is Paul. Before we jump back into today's show, I want to take a moment to recognize a truly special milestone, Smithsonian Associates' 60th anniversary. Since 1965, Smithsonian Associates, the largest museum-based education program in the world, has been inspiring lifelong learners with unforgettable experiences, connecting audiences with the Smithsonian's museums, research, and experts in new and exciting ways. This year, the celebration is for you, with a full year of special programming both online and in person, from behind-the-scenes looks at Smithsonian collections to conversations with astronauts, historians, filmmakers, and curators. There's something for everyone. Smithsonian Associates has created something extraordinary. I'm proud to partner with Smithsonian Associates to share their incredible programs with the Not Old Better Show audience. Thanks for being part of this journey. Here's to 60 years of curiosity, learning, and discovery. Smithsonian Associate Dr. Barry Gordon is our guest today, returning guest, certainly an audience favorite. We will have links in our show notes today so that our audience can find out more information about Dr. Gordon, his work, of course, as founder of the Memory Clinic at Johns Hopkins, some of the tools that he's mentioned, as well as links to his upcoming Smithsonian Associates presentation. Dr. Gordon, it is always such a pleasure to speak with you. I enjoy it. I know our audience gets so much out of this. Dementia, Alzheimer's, these are big subjects. As a matter of fact, I read that 30% of those over age 85 are likely to develop Alzheimer's. That's a big number. Should we all be starting to plan now, either for loved ones or for ourselves, even if we might not have some of those symptoms? We want to know kind of from you, how do we kind of conduct ourselves today so that we can live with it when it comes time?
A tough question.
Yeah.
I think it's reasonable to plan ahead,
Mm-hmm.
and I would advise people, you don't have to do it immediately, but it's something you should think about. Where's the information that your family needs to know, bank accounts, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Also, there's another aspect of this. What is the risk to your family? I mentioned that Alzheimer's disease is only one of the causes of dementia.
Mm-hmm.
Potentially, people ought to make their medical records, and even for that matter, their brains, available to their family. I know this is going to sound radical, but I think it's very appropriate, because otherwise the family members won't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And there are major medical institutions that offer such services. Johns Hopkins, for example, is one, and it's world famous in Alzheimer's disease and other related work. And you may discover that what you thought, or what your family thought, was Alzheimer's disease may be something else,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe not have the same risk or have a different kind of risk. So I think there's a fair amount of advanced planning people can do to help their families, and maybe help science as a whole know what's going on. Now, if you're 85, it's a different sort of planning than if you're 65, perhaps,
Mm-hmm.
or if you're 105. But planning nonetheless should be done. Again, that's one of those categories where I'm in the kind of 1 out of 10 category. I'm getting there,
Sure. Yeah. What if the planning leads to misdiagnosis? Because you mentioned sleep apnea, you mentioned certain medications and their side effects, and even depression can mimic some of these dementias. How do we kind of guard against ourselves or loved ones being misdiagnosed prematurely?
Well, part of it is the best way is to be open to the possibility that there's a misdiagnosis. So you have your primary ideas, but you retain openness to, could this be something else? Is something else
Mhm.
going on? And what do I need to investigate that? Um, in one case of mine years ago, we were told the person's father had diagnosed Alzheimer's disease early on in life, and that he was beginning to suffer, the person I saw was beginning to suffer problems, and he was convinced it was this early onset Alzheimer's disease. And we were convinced it was too initially. But then we actually managed to contact the people that had examined his father's brain. And it turned out to be nothing else, nothing at all like that.
Hmm.
And it turns out he got better on his own. Um, so I mention this because one, put your money down where you think the bet's most likely, but remain aware of other possibilities. Um, one not uncommon problem, by the way, with some older individuals is drinking alcohol,
Hmm.
and you have to be careful. People may hide the bottles. They may not be fully revealing of what they do. Um, Sometimes the daughter-in-law will say, "Wait a minute, I saw a couple of bottles up in the cupboard when I went to get some dishes out." Now, is this rare? A big problem, Paul, is that we don't know how often such things happen. In other words, we don't know how often there's a misdiagnosis. We know in some categories, in former Alzheimer's disease, as it used to be diagnosed, people were wrong about 15% of the time when they looked at people's brains. Given PET scanning and blood tests now, that number must undoubtedly be lower, but we don't know currently how many people are overdosing with sedative drugs, taking Valium long past the time they should be doing it. We don't know how many people are drinking secretly. We don't know how many other conditions there are. We don't even know how much sleep apnea there is, in a sense, in the general population. So, even though it's probably a low number, if it happens to you and you can actually solve your problem by getting rid of the Valium or whatever you're on, that would be important. So, one of the advantages or one of the well, it's like Sherlock Holmes. You're looking for the very low probability, but still possibility that something else could be happening.
Again, we will have links so that our audience can find out more information about Dr. Gordon's work, especially at the Memory Clinic at Johns Hopkins. In my research for our conversation today, Dr. Gordon, I found something really interesting that you say about this. That you say about the brain, and that is that you say the brain is almost always active. And I wonder, does that challenge this idea that memory loss somehow is inevitable? And do we in doing that, are we underestimating the brain's ability to adapt and even protect itself as we age?
I think the almost always active was in response
Mhm.
to that old statement that we only use 10% of our brains.
Yeah.
It turns out our brains are active almost all the time. I mean,
Mm.
in one way or another. And
Mhm.
where that statement came from is not clear, but it was clearly a myth to begin with.
Uh-huh. Mhm.
Um,
A myth in the sense that we use much more than our brain,
Everything
or
we
much more percentage of our brain. Yep.
not just it's working in ways that we don't even understand, but it's working all the time.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and so forget the 10% business. Okay,
Uh-huh.
um, what's what remains true maybe is that we only understand at best 10% of how our brain is working, and that number may be that's just a number I just pulled out of the air just because we were mentioning it. We don't really know. We know up to a point how our brain works, but we don't really know how it's actually working at the neural level, at the cellular level, at the system level. There's Is there a reasonable idea? We have reasonable ideas. Um, so there's plenty of room still to be learned for things to be learned. One of the problems with right now is is that if this were 300 years ago, we concede maybe we didn't know what we were doing. Okay. Right now, we're kind of in the cusp of we know enough to maybe be even dangerous or no, we don't know, but we don't know what we don't know.
One of the things perhaps is changing some perception. And I wonder if you could wave a wand today and change one thing that perhaps our culture, views about memory loss and aging, what would it be? And what is it going to take to change that?
If I could change one thing at this moment, I would actually
Mhm.
change the notion that it's inevitable
Mhm.
because to the extent people would understand it's not inevitable, they might look for causes of it and help fund the search for causes of it that currently isn't being done. Namely, to get the public behind research at every level, basic research, animal research, human research, to find out what's really going on. Um, to the extent we say, oh, it's inevitable, well, we're not going to do anything. But it's not inevitable, probably. We know, for example, while humans can live fourscore, 10 and more, we know that there are animals that live hundreds of years. And in fact, there's an active investigation now why different animals seem to have different lifespans. So, not older and better I forget, a Greenland ice shark is 400 years. Well,
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind having a percentage of that lifespan either. Now,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd like to be that cold, but on the other hand,
Right. Right. No, cold's not good.
so I think what ideally I'd like to see is people realizing the value of the basic sciences and then all the clinical sciences on top of that, and then all the clinical knowledge. For example, um, we don't know when people pass away now, autopsy rates are very low. We don't know why people are getting demented
Hmm.
unless they're in a special study. So ideally, I'd like to see all of that. It won't help us directly, but it will help our children and our children's children.
Dr. Barry Gordon, I just enjoy talking to you. I say this to you each time we talk. Please come back. Please, please, please do come back. Of course, you're going to be talking at Smithsonian Associates coming up. We're going to have all those links that I mentioned. Dr. Gordon's going to be talking about understanding Alzheimer's disease and the dementias, what we know and what we can do. Dr. Gordon, thank you for all of your time today, for being so generous. But please, continue this work because I know it's important stuff and our audience wants to know more from you.
Paul, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your work, too, in getting this out to the public.
Well, that was Smithsonian Associate Dr. Barry Gordon, clear, candid, and compassionate, as always. You may remember Dr. Gordon from his previous appearances where he has captivated us always with his rare blend of scientific clarity, wit, and heart. Of course, he's been back with us today to talk about the facts and fictions surrounding Alzheimer's and other dementias. And Dr. Gordon will be back at Smithsonian Associates for another excellent, thorough presentation coming up. Check out our show notes for more details. If you take away just a few things from today's conversation, let them be these. First, you are not powerless. Second, early signs matter, but so do the steps you take before they show up. And third, your brain at any age is more resilient than you've been told. Dr. Barry Gordon reminded us that movement, sleep, blood pressure, blood sugar, and human connection, real, simple things, are where prevention starts. Dr. Gordon also reminded us to question what we've been sold about brain health and instead lean into what science actually supports. Ask your doctor the hard questions. Talk to your family. And most of all, pay attention to yourself. Curiosity, after all, is one of the mind's most protective instincts. To hear more conversations like this one or to revisit today's episode, just visit us at notold-better.com. You will find our full archive with thousands of programs now, including hundreds from the Smithsonian Associates, all stories that matter to you and your family. Follow us on social media. We're on Twitter at NotOldBetter and Instagram at NotOldBetter for updates, inspiration, and behind-the-scenes content. This is a production of NOBS Studios. I'm Paul Vogelsang. Thanks for spending time with us. Be well, be safe. Let's talk about better. The Not Old Better Show, Smithsonian Associates interview series on radio and podcast. I hope you will join me again next time.